So for the last 3 years, JC and I have been calling this caravan our home. But now there's a bit of a plot twist. There's a little one on the way. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, things are about to get a little bit cramped in there. So we figured, no problem. I'll build us a shed for a little bit more storage for our family. Went to go check the price of wood, and my wallet said, there's no chance, bro. So I thought, we don't have the money, but we do have the time. Sasha, come here. Come up. Yeah, good girl. Good girl. And seeing as I've acquired a bunch of pallets that were destined for the landfill anyways, and we also have a couple of invasive blackwoods on the farm that need to be taken down, I figured, why not do some upcycling and also some alien clearing at the same time? So the plan is to make a plan. Break apart these pallets, cut down some trees, and see if I can turn a pile of scrap into a shed. Will it be cheaper? Definitely. Will it take twice, 3 times as long? Probably. Let's call it the world's most inconvenient shed build. Gross. When I came up with this idea, I had no clue as to how long it was actually going to take these pallets apart. I mean, I didn't even have any idea as to what the best technique was for taking apart a pallet. And I was going to have to learn quickly, because otherwise I would just end up wasting everybody's time. Luckily these blocks will come off relatively easy, I think. Yeah, I was definitely going to have to come up with a better way, otherwise I was going to end up with a really big pile of firewood. But, you know, as the age-old French saying goes, practice makes perfect, uh-huh. So I'm not going to lie to you, I've been busy taking pallets apart. I've lost count of the days. I think it's been about a week, and I've only got a couple pallets left to take apart. Then basically all the cladding is ready for the shed, so there's still quite a bit to do. Now, even though initially it was very frustrating and it was a lot of hard work, it was all worth it just being able to hit that last blockie off of that last plank. Oh, so close. Sweet relief followed by the sobering realization that now I had to remove every single nail from every single plank. Just another opportunity to learn, I guess. Well, one thing's for sure, since I've started this project, the weather's definitely started changing based on the fact that I'm wearing long pants, which is not very common for me. But I must say, taking these nails out, it's nogal monotonous. It's kind of nice though. You kind of know what to expect. There's never really any curveballs. So it's actually been weirdly nice. Now at this point I was getting a little bit worried. I'd been at this for way longer than I'd expected to be, and there was still no end in sight, and I hadn't even actually started building. But luckily that was about to change as I cleared away my old crafting table, cleared away some of the brush and leveled the ground, and finally start building the foundation of the shed. Now the thing is that you have to understand about me is I really like to live my life in a loose structure, which means I'm not much of a planner. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I can tell you this. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was to build things with whatever I could get my grubby little hands on. I remember building countless toy guns out of anything I could find. PVC piping, other pieces of BB guns, and I would just use whatever tools my dad had lying around, often a hacksaw, a screwdriver, and a whole roll of duct tape. I'm pretty sure he wasn't very impressed that I did that, but anyways, practical problem solving and resourcefulness is kind of at the core of my being. And I know a lot of the stuff that I make won't win any aesthetic awards, but at the end of the day, it's just like any skill. You practice enough and you'll refine your craft, and hopefully whatever you've made won't look like a big pile of poo-poo. I'd saved these pieces of fraught plywood from a build I did earlier in the year, and man, can I tell you how satisfying it was to be able to use it on this build. And it finally felt like I was making some headway in this project. Now all I had to do was find and cut down enough alien invasive trees to be able to build the frame of the shed. Luckily they weren't hard to come by, but man was I going to have my work cut out for me. My two target species were blackwoods and black wattles. Both are from the acacia genus and they are indigenous to the country of Australia. And to make things harder for myself, and with me being a bit of a Luddite, I had decided to cut down the trees with nothing but an axe. It's probably one of my more strange personality traits that I really love doing inconvenient things. For some reason, just making things harder than they need to be somehow adds value for me. Now, the area that I live in is well known for the harvesting of indigenous timbers during the late 1700s and most of the 1800s. It was a cool feeling for me knowing that I was experiencing many of the same physical labors that those people would have experienced when they were cutting down the trees. Now, yes, I have a lot more luxuries than they would have had back then, like a loving dog by my side, and some of the trees that I cut down definitely were a lot more dinky than the ones they would have been cutting down, but I appreciate the fact that I got a glimpse into the hard lives they must have lived, making use only of the natural resources they had around them. And that's the thing with using what the earth provides you. There's a lot more processes that you have to get through to actually be able to build with the things. And in my case, all of these trees had to still be debarked, and let me tell you, the weather wasn't going to make it easy on me. It's a nice and chilly winter's morning today. I was up late last night finishing up debarking the last of the logs. I actually really like working at night. It's very rustic. You're not in the sun and it's nice and quiet and there's different noises than what you're used to. So it was actually quite nice. It has not stopped raining, maar ek's bietjie op 'n time crunch en ek moet hierdie ding klaar kry. So ja, ek moet maar aanhou werk. And finally, all of the materials I need to build this shed are ready. Now I can actually start with the fun part of building the thing. Now I had a very vague idea about how I was going to actually build the shed. But crisis, at this point the doubts really started to kick in. Seeing how skew these poles were that I had gotten really made me think that I'd wasted all this time. And I was starting to think maybe all those looks of derision that people were giving me when I told them that I was going to do this wasn't too far out of place. But I'd done so much work at this point, I just put my head down and hoped for the best. I guess in this case this shed build is kind of a metaphor for life. You never really have any control about the cards that you're going to be dealt, and sometimes you just got to make do with what you have. Now at this point the rain and the cold was really starting to take a toll on my motivation, and I don't think this poor floor is ever going to be the same again. Now luckily the weather had improved a little bit and most of the frame was done, so I decided it was time to get started on the cladding of the shed. Now I had managed to source some other second-hand materials from my father-in-law, which included a door, some roofing tin, and these old garage doors, which I was going to use for some extra cladding around the shed. Now, all of the boards that I'd gotten from the pallets I was going to put on the walls in a clapboard style, which admittedly is not something that I had ever done before, but I wasn't going to let that get in my way. The initial plan was to use some of the smaller rusted nails that I'd gotten from the pallets to put up the clapboard cladding, but I quickly bailed on that idea because I realized using rusty bent nails was literally going to drive me insane, so I had to fork out some cash and buy some screws. But I guess the silver lining is that made everything go a little bit faster. Some of the roof sheets I found was from our neighbor's farm, and they told me that they had removed it from some of the original buildings on their property. So some of these sheets are over 80 years old, and that kind of just adds to the appeal for me. Yes, there were some rusty bits that I had to cut out, and there were a couple holes here and there, but there was nothing I couldn't fix. I find building roofs very hard and tedious work, climbing up and down ladders and constantly working above your head, but the cool thing is you always get such a nice view from on top of the roof. And the weird thing is, it's always such a satisfying feeling putting a roof over a structure. It makes it feel so much more cozy. It's kind of like this ancestral drive to protect us from the elements. Well, we're running a little bit low on wood. I'm hoping I'm going to have enough to finish this front wall, otherwise I'll have to make a plan. And I'm definitely going to need some creative problem solving on the door frame, because it's not looking very straight. The chapter of building the world's most inconvenient shed was nearing its end. But the Book of Life has so many different chapters in it. And I guess the next chapter that's waiting for me is called Fatherhood. And I'm so excited to get reading and see how it's going to play out for me and Jesse and our son. And every single parent I've spoken to has basically told me the same thing. And that's just to enjoy the ride and don't make any plans, because any plans you're going to make are more than likely not going to work out. And I think I'm kind of okay with that. Moment of truth. Yeah, that's good enough. That is one ugly door. Have you ever seen one of those paintings where the first time you look at it, everything looks like it's perfect? But the more time you spend looking at it, you can just see all of these weird things going on and you think to yourself, what the hell is happening? That's exactly how I feel when I look at this shed. The more time you look at it, the more odd things you see that are going on. But I kind of like that about it. Well, there it is. The shed's done. Well, 90% done. There's still a couple of small things that I need to do, but it's mostly done. And you know what? It was fun. I went into this thinking that it was going to be a mess, and honestly, it was a mess. But it was a good kind of mess. You know, the kind of one where you work things out on the fly, a real boermakeplan situation. Would I do it exactly like this again? Heck no. But would I use upcycled materials again? Yes. Actually, I can guarantee that I will. There's just something about taking stuff that's lying around and turning it into something new that just feels right to me. The fact that this is also a sign of our family growing makes this build even more special to me. That I can show our son this building in a couple of years and tell him that I built this for him. Plus, let's be honest, there are literally millions of South Africans all across the country that build in exactly the same way. And they probably do a lot better job than I did, and that's kind of humbling. But for a first try, I reckon it came out better than expected. So that's the world's most inconvenient shed. Crooked nails, mismatched boards, and old roofing tin. A little experiment in building with what you have, and you know what? I'll call that a win. And I'm going to be honest with you, if it wasn't for JC, I can totally see myself living in this thing. There's more than enough space.